The need to do one's national service was something of a pain, not only for having to be involved for 2 years in doing work which wasn't part of one's career, but because one felt that it was a waste of time, and also by the time I was about to do my national service, the threat of war was significantly reduced. So one just spent the time and hoped that you wouldn't find yourself being posted to some far and away place. In that respect I was fortunate, and I went into the RAF. I had hoped when I first signed on that I would be able to train as a navigator. In fact, one of my close friends at school, Phil Harris, was actually able to do that. He was rather lucky and got a 2-year short service commission. And the first time I saw him in uniform, he came up to me and said that he was doing my job, and that he hoped that I had applied to serve in the RAF for my national service and to become a navigator, because he knew how keen I was on navigation and maps and all that goes with it. However, when I actually got to doing my national service, they had scrapped national service commissions. So that meant that I wasn't going to go too far vis-a-vis the rank that I was going to be able to achieve. However, life wasn't too boring in national service for me, as I was posted to an airfield in Cambridgeshire, and we were there involved with an operational RAF station, which in fact at the time, because it was a training station, it had more landings and takeoffs than Heathrow Airport at that time. Well, that of course was at a time when Heathrow was very new, and the number of takeoffs and landings was substantially lower than it is today. However, being on the airfield was certainly more interesting than being a pen pusher, and it actually gave me the opportunity of learning to drive, because we had a Land Rover, especially for the personnel involved in marshalling and controlling the airfield, and after a little test I was able to drive the Land Rover. That didn't mean to say that I could drive on the outside roads, but it was a great help, as while I was up at Cambridge, where I was doing my national service, I applied to get my driving licence, and it's one of these strange situations where, bearing in mind we were at Cambridge, it's a very flat part of the country, and it was very difficult for the authorities dealing with the driving tests to find a sufficiency of hills. However, there was one particular hill which they used, and I had to use it. That was complicated because it was a very busy road. But having said all that, I was pleased to pass the test, and that meant that I could drive on all the roads in addition to the airfield. I was actually complimented by the tester, who was surprised that I drove so well. And I pointed out to him, have I said this before?
No, just keep looking at us.
You're waving at me.
Talk to us.
And I pointed out to him that part of my duties was to drive around the airfield at night, only on side lights, and bearing in mind that there was precious little illumination, it was a pretty testing situation, particularly as you might find yourself in the middle of a queue of jet aircraft waiting to take off. So one had to have one's wits about one when you were driving on the airfield. So clearly that enabled me to go forward and get through the test. Well, the National Service, as I was indicating earlier, was fairly boring, mundane stuff. But having then got to the end of it, I went out to look for a job again. Now, under the rules of National Service, the employers had to take back employees who had been affected by National Service. So I dutifully went back to the employer I was with prior to National Service, and he said, "Oh well," he said, "Yes," he said, "Yes, I've got to take you back if you want me to take you back." I then said to him, "Well, in all the circumstances, it didn't seem to me that he wanted to pay me very much money, and so I set about finding another job." This was an interesting exercise because being qualified, this is the first time that I was looking for a job as a qualified chartered surveyor, enabled me to go round the marketplace. It was fascinating really because obviously one got to know quite a few fellow young surveyors, and there was about half a dozen of us who used to put our heads together about the various jobs that were on offer, and that if we were lucky enough to get an interview, we would contact the others and said, "Oh, I got an interview for the XYZ job," and they were this, that and the other. And on one occasion there was, it was ICI actually. ICI were looking for a surveyor, and so I duly went along to the interview, and the interviewer he said, we're thinking of developing or building a school so that we can train our employees. How would you go about it? And so he wanted to know all the ins and outs of organising a programme for building. And so I passed my experience of this interview to two other friends who'd also been shortlisted, and they themselves were asked exactly the same questions as I had, and so they were able to benefit from my experience. I mean, it didn't help me in any respect, but it was good because it meant that you could liaise with your friends and understand what was going on.
So did they get the job?
Nobody got the job. So what it turned out to be, that it was just a ruse to put an advertisement in for surveyors to find out how they would go about doing a particular job, like setting up a new training school, and then having got all this information from a whole variety of applicants, they say, oh, well, we know how we want to go about it in future, and there's no need for us to employ a surveyor. So it was those sort of things which helped to make life a little bit more interesting. And I suppose in a way, because we'd got together on this, we were one move ahead of the prospective employer, because we knew what game he was up to. The job that I actually landed after my national service was quite interesting, insofar as I was working with a firm of clothes manufacturers, and
Penny tailors,
yeah,
Price's tailors.
yes, Price's Tailors, who had about 200 odd shops throughout the UK, and this was good experience for me insofar as that I had been working, as mentioned, with GL Hearn and Partners. Again, a lot of retail shop work, and so I was able then to develop my knowledge of the retail scene for about 2 years after that. My work with A.J. Hines and Company was very helpful, insofar as that a lot of the work related to managing commercial property company, and with it the development or redevelopment of those properties which offered any scope. I was therefore able to get experience in building contracts and leasing the completed buildings, which in many ways was not only very interesting, but served to be that much more remunerative, bearing in mind that rather than just involve oneself in management, this side whereby you were actually designing and building property was clearly more demanding, but it was also more remunerative, and so that enabled me to develop my career further. I was therefore capable of holding down more responsible jobs, and to work within public property companies. I suppose that the more interesting one was Capital and Counties. Capital and Counties were seeking qualified surveyors, and in this connection they had a major redevelopment scheme to undertake, and as it happened, when I was previously with Costain, I secured some worthwhile experience in Sunderland and Newcastle, where we were involved with them with a number of new building developments. And so when this post for a senior surveyor was advertised for Newcastle upon Tyne, I thought that I stood a good chance, and indeed I landed that job, and which, looking back over my career, was probably the most challenging but at the same time interesting job that I ever undertook, and to be in charge of a development team with up to 200 people, it meant that you needed to have a pretty wide knowledge of the process.
How old were you there, then, Brian?
My age at the time, Christine will tell you, I would probably be about 30 at that time. So that was a big breakthrough for me. At the same time, I had been able to pursue my political interests, and one of the senior directors of Capital Counties, as it happened also to be a Member of Parliament, and in earlier years I had interested myself in politics, but I have to say, led by Christine, my wife. That is where we met. I don't know how many people know that, but you could blame politics for the fact that we met, and the rest, of course, is open knowledge. So, working with Capital Counties was wonderful in terms of being involved with an extremely exciting project, but at the same time being alongside one or more senior members of the company who are involved with politics. So that all worked out very well, and I was able to aspire to be a parliamentary candidate whilst I was with Capital and Counties, and the opportunity with the support of your employer was really quite something, and I applied to go on the Conservatives' central list for would-be parliamentary candidates, and due to the work that I and Christine were doing where we lived in Sevenoaks at the time, I was able to get myself recommended to go on the approved list of prospective parliamentary candidates, and in that context one was sent lists of constituencies where there were vacancies. Well, I offered myself to countless numbers of constituencies who were seeking candidates. This is a very uphill task, and one has to be very patient. Well, I went and attended interviews in lots and lots of constituencies, and then one came forward at Darlington, and Darlington obviously was a long way from where I lived in Sevenoaks, but as I worked for quite a lot of the time in the northeast, in Newcastle, it enabled me to go and interest myself in the political side of things in the northeast and in Darlington, and as a consequence of this, my application was successful, whereby I was selected as the prospective parliamentary candidate for Darlington in the first election in 1974. Can we pause that? Is that right? No, we didn't. We met on the doorstep, I think, with Noel Hope.
Darling, we met at a dance. We went with Noel and I went with
I know you were, but I thought that I met you on the doorstep first.
No.
That was another girl.
Oh, no. Well, anyway, you asked the question of Christine, she'll give you the proper answer. Yes, so...
And what went through your mind when you met Christine?
What went through my mind?
What were your thoughts?
Christine was, and probably still is, very assiduous in the tasks that she sets, i.e. if she was interested in getting somebody to buy tickets to go to a dance or anything else, she would hang in and do everything to make sure that you bought those tickets, i.e. that she was going to achieve the task that she set herself. And so I have to say that she was an exceptionally good young Conservative. She worked very hard for the Young Conservatives up in Hendon, that's where it was, Hendon North. If I may say, she was very popular amongst fellow young Conservatives. She was very active and enjoyed what she was doing and was successful in what she was doing. So there you are.
So did you become one of her objectives then, to make sure that...
Oh yes, it turned out that I was one of her objectives. But that took a bit of a time. I mean, because we used to mix, like we mixed with lots of other young Conservatives, and I think one of the dances that, probably the first one we went together, we had to get a bus.
We went with Noel, didn't I?
With Noel, and take him. We went back to his where he lived. Yeah, so that was good. That was good.
What
And
happened
then
there?
Noel met Pam at the same time,
Yeah.
same night.
So we both met our future wives on the same night. That was a consequence of the Young Conservative dance.
And when did you share your first kiss?
Oh, I don't know about that. Christine probably know that one.
What's that, darling?
It was probably the same that night.
It was the same night.
Yeah, we kissed
went
each
with
other
Noel.
good night.
I went with Noel and Noel said, could he bring his friend Brian? And his friend Brian was this Brian.
Yeah.
So I met Brian and we went to the dance and Pam was there and Noel met Pam. And
you can tell
the rest is
everybody.
history.
You can tell everybody else. One of the things that you remember was the fact that I had an umbrella. You remember I had my umbrella with me?
Yes, your umbrella.
Was it
What?
raining then?
No, Dad always used to bring an umbrella.
Might rain.
What did you do with this umbrella that night?
Hanging time in the cloakroom.
In the cloakroom. That
There
cloakroom.
was no rain.
No.
Oh, it
He's-
may have
Part
been.
of the it was part of the rig.
Oh, it's part of the look.
It
Was
was
it?
part of the rig, yeah.
Was it part of the be prepared sort of outlook?
Mm.
Did you have a bowler hat or anything? like that?
No, didn't have that.
I had trilby hat.
And how long after you met did you propose to Christine?
Oh gosh.
Long time.
Long time. Well, you see, I was doing national I then did national service. Wait a minute. Catherine
Did it?
Countess was after, wasn't it?
Yeah, Nora, we went on holiday together, didn't we? Nora and Pam got
Yeah.
engaged first,
Yeah.
and then they got married in 59?
58.
58, because it's their golden this year.
The golden wedding this year.
Yeah. I got married in
2008.
58, so we had to wait until Dad had done his national service. And then when he'd done his national service, we got engaged. And then I think we got engaged 1 year and we got married the following year.
Mm.
So what year did you meet then? What was the timing?
What would it be 50?
What's that, love?
We met in 57?
56 or 57?
56 probably.
Yeah, quite some
So I went
time.
into national service in 57, didn't I? I went in national service 57,
Yes.
so we'd met before then.
But I helped you with all your studying. I did all the library books.
Take some exams as well.
Pardon?
Did you take some exams for him as well?
No, I didn't do that, but I went and did all the research and got all the books.
See, I needed to get technical books out of the library and things, and they weren't easy to come by. They were very expensive, so one needed to borrow them. And Christine was able to help me by going and borrowing books. It was quite trying, actually, when you were studying, because textbooks were very expensive, and they weren't necessarily very much available. So, I mean, I was a student member of the RICS, so you could borrow books from the RICS for a fortnight or something like that. And Christine was helpful insofar as she used to borrow books for me and take them back. But yeah. Also, when I was did I be studying then? Yeah. Because I had bought a house with my mother in Bexley, and that was hard. You're not recording this, are you? Oh, I didn't know that. That was hard because I had to take out a mortgage, and so I went to the Abbey National Building Society to get this mortgage. And actually, I could only do it on a Saturday morning because I was working otherwise. So I went along to the head office of the Abbey National Building Society in Baker Street one Saturday morning, and said I wanted to buy a house, and I got the details of the house. It was a new house down in Bexley, and so he said, the chap who was interviewing me, he said, "Oh, how old are you?" I told him, and he then said, well, wait a minute. He said, you're only 20. And so he said, you can't buy a property unless you're 21. So I had to point out to him that I wasn't anticipating completing the purchase until I was actually 21, which is about 3 or 4 weeks' time. So I then carried on, filled up more of the form, and he said, have you done your national service? So I said, would you give me the paper, the questionnaire back? So I took it back and looked at it again and said to him, I can't see any question on your form which asks about national service. And so I said, why are you asking me a question that's not on the form? So he said, oh yes, you're right. So I said, well, if I give you the answer, will that go against me? So he said, oh well, if it's not on the form, he said, I suppose it can't. So I said, well, on that basis, I'll give you the answer that I haven't done my national service, but I've got sufficient money put aside to help pay for the ongoing costs of the mortgage whilst I'm in national service. And so I was one of the youngest people to take on a mortgage in those days. I then had to, when I got into national service, found that you had a pay parade. So every week you went on pay parade to be paid. Well, because I had a national service grant, they then made a substantial deduction from my pay to pay the grant. And it turned out that it was only about 7 shillings. And so I caused a great commotion on the RAF station where I was because they couldn't pay you less than 10 shillings, and I'd only earned 7 shillings. And so there was a right dilemma, because I had to go on pay parade and be paid, but I hadn't earned enough money for the minimum of the 10 shillings. So so what they did, they said, well, what we'll do is you can come on pay parade, but you won't actually get paid. And they thought that was within the law. But it caused a tremendous commotion, that did. However, in the end, they said, no, this is silly. What we'll do, we'll pay you the 10 shillings, but then you will have been paid 3 shillings more than you were due, and we will deduct it in 3 months' time when you will have earned more money, because you go through the service. So that was one of these dotty things that one confronted oneself with in national service or with the government.